Good afternoon. I'm Dennis Galucki, and welcome to the 540th Imagine Greater Buffalo program and the 162nd YouTube Imagine Buffalo program hosted by our wonderful Buffalo and Erie County Public Library. Thank you for joining us today. Glad that you're able to do so. This program is created by the Center for the Study of Art, Architecture, History and Nature, or C-SAAHN, as I like to pronounce the acronym, and ImagineLifelongLearning.com. Now, before we get started, a little housekeeping. Everyone watching will be muted and your video turned off. If you have a question or a comment, please type it into the chat box and we'll go through them at the end of the presentation. We are recording this program so you can watch it again later on the Downtown Central Library's Facebook page and their YouTube channel. And certainly we hope you share the link with others. Now, on to our featured speakers. Felicia Beard is the Associate Vice President of Racial Equity Initiatives at the Community Foundation for Greater Buffalo. She is responsible for developing, supporting, and advancing the Foundation's commitment to racial and ethnic equity. She also manages the work of the Greater Buffalo Racial Equity Roundtable, a group of more than 35 community leaders committed to tackling racial equity in our region, Western New York. Felicia is also a member of Leadership Buffalo, the Junior League, the Board of Directors of the United Way, and the Erie County Corrections Specialist Advisory Board. Glenn Jackson is a Group Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer of M&T Bank, where he advances efforts to promote diversity, inclusion, and belonging for all colleagues across the company. Jackson is a graduate of Harvard University who joined M&T in 1999 as a participant in the company's management development program. Glenn also served as Chief Operating Officer and Senior Director of Programs of Buffalo Promise Neighborhood, a comprehensive school-based initiative led by M&T to reverse the cycle of generational poverty on the east side of Buffalo. So now let's hear directly from Felicia Beard and Glenn Jackson. Folks, take it away.
Well, I guess I'll go first since my mic is unmuted. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me. I am going to share a slide as I give you a high-level overview of the work of the Greater Buffalo Racial Equity Roundtable, which has been occurring in our community since 2015. So what you see in front of you, hopefully, is this is a simplistic way of me telling you about a somewhat complicated body of work. The Greater Buffalo Racial Equity Roundtable, as I mentioned, began in 2015 as an unprecedented cross-sector collaboration for nonprofits, businesses, public institutions, and faith organizations in our community. I say unprecedented because we were not necessarily working collaboratively in that type of a configuration prior to 2015. And then we also consider this to be a grass tops strategy, meaning we were focused mainly, and our focus mainly on the systems change leaders being at the table, creating solutions for achieving an expanded and inclusive economy in the Western New York region. The diagram in front of you represents the 10 strategies that the Greater Buffalo Racial Equity Roundtable members selected to focus on. We do understand and recognize that these are not the end-all be-all strategies for achieving racial equity, but these were the strategies that were within the reach of the roundtable members to be able to make some progress, immediate progress in achieving an expanded and inclusive economy within our region. And so what you see is the 4 circles at the top, the green circles, are our capacity building strategies. And these strategies are focused on creating conditions for change. And what that means is really planting the seed in our community about racial equity, helping business leaders, managers, and others even understand racial equity and why communities of color exist the way they do today. We have a narrative change strategy where we partnered with our local public broadcasting network to tell true, authentic stories about communities of color, and that would be the full story about communities of color. We have a racial equity impact analysis training, which is designed for decision makers and leaders in their C-suites to understand about policies, practices, and procedures and how those affect communities of color. We have racial healing circles, which is an individual strategy. And of course, the Buffalo Niagara Partnership has a number of offerings to the businesses that are members within their organizations. The blue circles on the bottom represent the specific systems that the Racial Equity Roundtable members have identified and are addressing for systems change. If we start at around 3 o'clock, we have a business leaders task force, which is made up of 14 major employers in our community who have themselves, from their own decision-making, designed an initiative called the Buffalo Purchasing Initiative, where those major employers are contracting directly with businesses of color to help those businesses to develop their capacity to do more business with these major employers, as well as grow the wealth of those businesses of color in our community. Our Reentry Coalition is a partnership with the Erie County Department of Mental Health, as well as our Erie County Sheriff's Office. We have a one-stop reentry hub for anybody who is reentering back into Western New York, where they can get comprehensive services to ensure that they are successful upon coming back into our community. Our Boys and Young Men of Color initiative is embedded within Say Yes Buffalo. We are very proud of our Breaking Barriers Youth, which are a part of this initiative, where our young men are being the voice of change that they want to see for the issues that affect boys and young men of color in our region, as well as nationally. Employ Buffalo Niagara is also another initiative that is operated by the Buffalo Niagara Partnership. And their main strategy right now is focused on a benefits cliff calculator, which employers are using to help them understand what happens when their frontline employees are offered an increase in pay, and oftentimes they have to decline because that small increase in pay or that increase in pay has the potential to cause their employees to fall off a benefits cliff, meaning they lose the subsidies they're receiving to work at their job, such as food stamps and other items that would cause that individual to actually go backwards as opposed to forwards with that promotion. And then we also have our Juvenile Justice Works Initiative, where we partner with the Buffalo Public Schools on putting restorative justice practices within 5 specific schools as a pilot. And we are hoping to scale that to the other schools. And then our last initiative is our youth employment, where we opened up Buffalo Futures, which is downtown in the Erie County Community College, which is now SUNY Erie. I said that completely wrong. Training center, and it's open to help kids 16 to 24 follow pathways to family sustaining wages. I know Glenn wants to speak, but that pretty much is the work. Yes, you do. In a nutshell, and now I'll come back around after Glenn. Thanks.
No, Felicia, thank you. And Dennis, thank you and the team. It's great to be here. I know that it's taken me a while to get here and be able to organize. So thank you for the patience there. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the folks that are there to listen and doing the hard work. You know, Felicia, I knew she'd go there. Like, she didn't even do sort of the 201 or 301 lesson. She's at like 501, like advanced PhD level. I'm going to back up to the space that I occupy, which is more like preschool level, to describe sort of where I think we are and why I think this is a pivotal moment for Western New York and Buffalo very specifically. And Felicia's very aware of this, right? There's so many spaces that we occupy as leaders in this space, be it sort of foundation spaces. You heard about the equity roundtable that Felicia sits on, the Buffalo Together Fund that Felicia sits on, and that sort of we sit in those spaces together. And there seems to be this alignment that's happening that's really important. There's also this understanding that when you think about the foundations, and if I name a few that we both sit on, so Community Foundation, OSHI, Western New York Charitable out of M&T, those three alone approach 30 million in giving every year into the Buffalo area, right? When you add up the entire foundational impact and giving into the not-for-profit space as we're trying to get to better educational and economic outcomes, that number is well north of 60 or $70 million a year. So then I ask you, what's the progress we've made in the last 40 years if you take those numbers and you look at the return on that investment, right? And it's stark. Now, here's the good news. We've got a lot of really good people, very well-intended and positive intent, but the mechanisms and the ways we went to work and how we showed up was wrong, right? You talked a little bit about me sitting in the Buffalo Promise neighborhood. Man, we were there, we were showing up. But were we centering on the right voices? Were we centering on the voice of the population and asking more than we were telling? And in my humble opinion, the answer was we weren't, right? We were doing more telling than we were listening. So how do we center that voice, and how do we center and actually get to the root causes instead of the symptoms, which a lot of us deal with every single day? Now I wake up here 4 or 5 years later, and I'm looking back at Felicia, who we met probably 4 or 5 years ago, pre-COVID. I look at our organizations drawing tighter and closer, be it the corporate space, the foundation space, not-for-profit space. And there's this almost common groupthink in a positive way of groupthink, where that alignment is now here and the collaboration is here. And now imagine what we could do with those dollars to show up differently if we center on the perspectives that we never have in the past. And I feel like that's the moment we're having right now. So you're going to see, and we're finishing up a letter to the community coming out of OSHI, and I've got it sitting in front of me as they're waiting on me to hit send. And it's going to talk about the moment we had as an organization and one of the largest foundations in Western New York, where a lot of good intention, a lot of good work, but at the end of the day, were we doing the best we could to center that voice? The answer was no. So how are we going to do that going forward? How are we going to align with Community Foundation, other foundations to really triple and quadruple the impact and really start to get to better economic outcomes as we go? Centering on racial equity is extremely important. And I would encourage folks that you hear that term and we race to wanting to put a definition to it and prove that we know what it means. We're all in the learning phase here. We had Open Buffalo and Franchelle Parker, who was amazing, and her team with Max and Dr. B come in and sort of, we've heard it. I've had Felicia, how many racial equity trainings have you had? 1 million, right? And the reality is, it's continuous learning, continuous improvement. And until we have the right vocabulary to articulate what the problem even is, until we understand the history of why we are where we are, until we understand how policies have gotten us into spaces and places, then we can start to unwind the true systemic challenges that we have versus dealing with and trying to treat the symptoms. My hope is that I think we're here. I know we're here. I know that leaders like Felicia and others are going to help us lead out of this. And it's going to take everyone on this call and beyond to align, collaborate, and horizontally across participate in ways that we never had before. First and foremost, how do we center on the voice? How do we elevate the right voices, the right leaders that have been there the entire time to help guide where the work should go and how fast it should go? And the last thing I'll say is this. It's sort of my own personal theme. The moment you think you have the answer, you probably don't. You're probably resorting back to old ways of thinking where you think you have the answers and you're problem solving. The reality is this is going to be hard. We're going to make lots of mistakes. But if we're open to learning in that growth mindset, I think we're going to find that we'll get to better outcomes faster if we start with the people involved. So that is it from me. Felicia, I'll throw it back to you. And I know we've got questions coming up here as well.
Yeah. So, Glenn, you probably should have went first to set that up. Although you said elementary, and I think you went kind of big with the numbers, but anyway, just to give just a little bit on the training question that you asked, we actually have had 4,000 leaders within our community participate in the racial equity impact analysis training. And the other thing I would add concerning the training, because it really goes to what Glenn was saying about policies, practices, and procedures, is that is exactly what that training is about. It's about talking to the CEOs and their C-suites and the people who are in charge of decision-making about the policies that have caused communities of color to exist the way they do today. And the thing that I'm very proud of about our racial equity impact analysis training is that it is not a check the box. It's not a one and done. We actually have a 3-part training for decision makers and leaders in our community, where they go through a part 1 and they learn about the policies such as redlining and the New Deal, which everybody loves to talk about with FDR, but it really was discriminatory. But anyway, they learn about that. And then another part where we raise up people who will go back to those organizations and make sure that that training is not lost, because oftentimes you'll go somewhere and you're excited about what you've learned, and then you get back to your office and you get back into the same rut. And then the last piece of that training with those coaches is they are giving 4 90-minute support sessions where they can create a work plan, meaning they can identify policies or benefits or whatever it is within their organization that they want to work on right away, and spend those 90-minute follow-up sessions with the facilitators of the training to actually troubleshoot through any challenges they're having, so that they actually get the how to implement the learning. So I will finish with that, turn it over to Dennis, who probably has questions for both of us.
Well, we're hoping others will submit some questions. Melissa will take care of those. Felicia, you had mentioned the roundtable started, I think, 2015. And as I recall, the Kellogg Foundation, you were recipients of a very major grant and very sought after grant by the nation, and you folks won it. Then 2022 happens, May 14th, 2022. Tell me, how did things change within that roundtable in terms of the discussion of where we've been and what we suddenly need to do with that terrible event on May 14th of 2022? Can you reflect on that?
What I can tell you is that the roundtable members were very committed. We doubled down on our work. They continuously, even today, ask the questions of what more can we do? What more can we do? And so the Kellogg Foundation has been very generous to our community. Not only did they award us the Truth Racial Healing Transformation Award back in 2017, but when we had the mass shooting in 2022, they gave us additional funding to help our community with healing. So we were able to offer racial healing circles, expand that particular strategy to be able to have conversations with different communities with the East Side and the West Side. We have 10 organizations that we funded with that particular funding. We are in the process of releasing the strategy that we've been working with the Buffalo Together Community Response Steering Committee on creating in the upcoming weeks. But the roundtable members have been engaged. Dr. Ansari and Thomas Buford are roundtable members, and they're co-chairing that particular steering committee, but very engaged and very concerned about what more can we do, especially as systems change leaders. We know, based on the broken systems that have plagued our community, that person was able to target top supermarket on the east side of Buffalo where he could do the most damage. And the roundtable members are very committed to addressing those systemic issues so that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen again. That was horrible. There's much more I could say about that, but I'm just going to stop there. Glenn, if you want to chime in, I see you over there.
Especially Glenn. Well, from a standpoint, Glenn, there's been pushback especially over the last year or so on DEI, and yet there you are with a major bank, our one headquartered firm here in Buffalo, and every impression I have is politically there may be pushback, but corporations see the value of DEI, and especially after a May 14th event. What does that sound like a correct observation?
Dennis, it is. And I would say if you said that to me 7 or 8 years ago, or even in 2020, I would say we're not there yet. And any attack on that space is probably a concern. But I think and Felicia can attest to this as well, what you're seeing is organizations are realizing, and they went from it's nice to do to what we're transferring into now, which was always the case, but people didn't have an understanding, is it's actually good business to do, right? Like when you look at the shifting demographics and you look at the demographics, the places we already exist in presently, not to mention the shifts that are happening, the better you can connect with your customers and your communities, the better you build the products for their needs, the more they're going to buy it, right? So the only way you do that is make sure the folks that you have that you're building for are representing the spaces and the jobs that you employ to help you build the right products and services to serve that clientele and those consumers. So at the end of the day, what I think you're going to see is the shift from a nice to do to the right thing to do. It's going to be the only thing to do for a growth strategy for organizations, including a big bank, right? Big banks, you're too big to fail, everything else. The banks are going to continue to fail. They always do. The ones that will fail in the future are the ones that are so myopic and insular that they don't see that the only growth strategy really is a multicultural growth strategy, because we're shifting so quickly. And if they stick with the traditional suburban bank branch model, good luck. You will cease to exist, right? And the bigger bank will gobble you up because they're going to be able to activate with the community around, build the products and services in the way you want to be served. Depending on what community we're talking about, some people want digital and they don't want to see a person. Some communities, all they want to do is talk to a person. If you can't sort of go through that entire spectrum of expectation and understand your customer needs and how they want to be served, you're going to fail as an organization, be it a bank, be it a retail store, name that thing. So it's the only way and only growth strategy I see going forward. And this spans the entire globe, certainly the United States.
Good. How are we doing, Melissa? Do we have some questions?
We do have a few questions. So the first
Good.
one, I think either of you can answer this, or both of you. Do you attribute any of our racial divide in the city and region to the physical design of our neighborhoods? The concrete canyon we call the 33 Kensington Expressway dividing the city. How do we break down that barrier?
Go ahead, Felicia.
So I would say yes. I think the 33 was designed to, well, if you go back to redlining and how communities were built, the suburban communities were built on the outskirts of the city. Well, people had to now come to work, and work is in the city. So instead of having to go through communities of color where there was a concentration of communities of color due to white flight, now, how do they get through in the most direct route to get them from home to work and then back? And hence we have the 33, which helps white people, but it also divides community that's there. That's my terminology and speaking of it. Glenn probably have a more eloquent way of saying that, but that's just me saying it in the few seconds I could say it. I mean, it was a design. It was set up, and it was set up to benefit white people, and it destroyed Black neighborhoods. Yeah.
And I think to be able to say that out loud and accept that as fact is where you start, right? Like we don't have to get into a PhD on this one. It's if you understand the policies and laws got us here and they were real, right? And the educational policies like got us here. That, I mean, you look at veterans that were Black men that could not participate in getting a mortgage, even though the rest of the veterans that were coming back couldn't. We're like, what are we talking about, right? So at the end of the day, there were policies and there were strategies that built our cities. And here's the silver lining. Every single major city in the United States of America was built the same way.
Yes.
So you go to another sister city, brother city, wherever you want to go, you're going to see the same construct, and every east side of every city is the same. Why? Because it was constructed that way. So once you understand that history, and once everyone comes on, and when I say everyone, I mean everyone, right? Not just Felicia and I. Like everyone, then we can start to change and deconstruct the things. But until we all agree that it was what it was, we're going to sit here and go back and forth like, what are you talking about? Because ignorance is bliss, and we've got to make sure we awaken, raise that awareness, and keep building.
Not to mention what you did on the Homestead Park system.
Yeah.
Which the whole community was designed to enjoy. Anyways, besides the communities around it. Keep going, Melissa.
There was another question, but I'm not sure if anyone feels comfortable answering it. Just because I don't know if you know about it, but in the Buffalo News this morning, there was an opinion article about a proposed New York State bill to increase the bottle deposit and how that would affect low and middle class families. If anyone wants to touch on that, obviously, if you don't know about it, then you may not feel comfortable speaking on it.
Listen, this is not going to be appropriate. What are we talking about? Tell me about jobs and wages that are livable wages in corporations and how we're hiring from the community. Like, we're talking about the back end. Like, well, if we just raise the bottle deposit, like, people are going to make, no, that's a symptom of a bigger problem. So I would rather talk about what is M&T doing to hire people from the community, to upskill folks in the community so they can have the roles we need to create the products and services. Everything else is a distraction from that. Major employers, who are you hiring? Who are you bringing? What schools are you recruiting from? Show me that, and then we'll show you real solutions that are actually targeting root causes, not symptoms. So sorry for that. You got me on my soapbox, but that's what I would say.
It's all right.
Good soapbox, Glenn. Glenn, you also, and just to build off of that, you had a program through this roundtable, as I recall, of affecting all your suppliers, of challenging the suppliers to an M&T to start getting on the same page, basically. Could you elaborate?
Yeah, I mean, it goes to a little bit of what Felicia was saying. Like, you have to, first change your own table, right? Who's sitting around your table? Change representation. Make sure you get your perspectives, and then understand that every resource that you put out, and you have the ability to put out to others to engage, there was a responsibility to actually be more directive in what that should look like. So I should have an expectation. If I'm paying someone hundreds of thousands of dollars as a consultant, I should have expectations about what work they're doing internally to make sure they have representation, what work they're doing to think about being mindful of environment, including the most important asset, which is people and human capital. So I think there was not a reluctance, but there just was a lack of awareness. So corporations were just like, I'm going to find the cheapest way to do these things and the most effective partners. It's like, no, now there's an expectations that we're here for the environment, every aspect of it, including people, which is the most important piece. Do you care for your employees? Are you employing folks that where you're at? Are you making sure that you're equitable in your ways of dealing with folks? Not just the product you're providing me. The how now matters. And I think Felicia said this, the how now matters more than the what. It used to just be get it done, I don't care how. Now it's like, oh no, I care more now about how than the what. Everyone can do the what, but the how now matters. And if we shift that value system to the how, we shift the entire game.
Yeah.
Wow.
Can I add something?
Please.
I'm sorry. So just a couple of things. So one is, I think Glenn had lifted up earlier about the historical truths. And I feel like back to that bottle question, like when I say we have a narrative change strategy and telling the true authentic narrative about communities of color, that's going to the historical truths. I mean, when we start talking about things that are bottles and other things, we're distracting from the true hurt and the foundation. And until we really look at that and address that and admit that that is something that has happened and a reality for communities of color, then we're going to keep going around in circles with these tactics or strategies that aren't going to benefit any community except the white community still. So I just want to add that. And then there was something else. We talked about the Business Leaders Task Force, and M&T Bank certainly is one of the partners. And I see Michael Ball is on as well for Highmark. And what those businesses have decided is that they want to figure out with their large corporations how they can contract directly with businesses of color, not on the second tier, but on the first tier, to help those companies to become wealthy or get more wealth. And what they're doing internally with their policies, their practices, or their procedures is they're carving out large contracts to make this happen. They're changing their policies specifically to help these businesses to like waive whatever the payment schedule normally is when you have a larger organization that comes to the table, so that they can do something to help these businesses be successful. And at the end of the day, this is one of the things that the roundtable, well, not one of, but the principle for which we've established the work of the Racial Equity Roundtable is on targeted universalism, that in the end, it's going to benefit everyone. So as these businesses are learning how to, structure policies differently to benefit businesses of color and help them grow their wealth, then they should be able to do that, for other businesses as well. But my point, which I hope I'm not losing, is that communities of color have been harmed. We got to stay focused on that. And the bottom line about these other pieces that we float off to is that that doesn't get back to the foundation of the policies and the things that got those communities to where they are today in the first place. And it's not that we all live in the United States of America and we all should be rich. There are true, real policies of oppression that have been placed on communities of color. And that is why they exist as such. They don't wake up and say, oh, by the way, I don't want to be successful. Sorry about my light.
No, that was good.
Oops.
Good, we got two people up on a soapbox to use this program correctly and imagine a greater Buffalo by, really talking honestly about the reality of the times, and you both point out, not getting distracted by side conversations almost. What are businesses doing to hire people from a broad mix of the community, pay them well, and that's a big starting point, I would think. Not just Black people, not just white people. We are a spectrum here in this community, as most cities have become. Detroit, Cleveland, all the rest, certainly on the Great Lakes, are evolving in a similar fashion and dealing with the same problems.
And Dennis, I'm sorry, I don't mean to jump in. The reason I want to lift that up too is because what happens is when you start talking about race, people get into the zero-sum conversation. Like, in order for you to do for people of color, you're going to take from white people, and that's not the case. It's something that's going to benefit everyone when we do it properly.
Yep.
The last thing I'll say, and Dennis, thank you for having us. This is an incredible platform that you created. 540th was just unbelievable. I think what I would love to see, and I think it's going to happen, is you're going to see a teeter-totter where we value sort of learned experiences. Everyone goes out and gets their credentials. You're going to see lived experiences start to be valued on par, because we all have lived experience. You talk about wisdom, and the longer you're on this planet, the more you know. That's just a fact, right? This is how it goes. And the more you value those lived experiences, you can actually create better experiences for folks that are going to experience the same damn thing. So when we get away from checking boxes and credentials, which we all have them, and that's great, but I can value somebody that's lived through, name that thing, that experience then can replicate through, and we can create better experiences for folks that are experiencing the same things in life. So I'm looking forward to that. I can see the shift happening. It's happening because of leaders like Felicia and Dennis, you and others. I'm more hopeful now than I've ever been. And honestly, 5 years ago, I'd have been like, I don't know. 10 years ago, I'd have been like, we're not going to make it. Now, when I see what's happening in Buffalo and having forums and platforms like this and the leadership that I'm seeing and the collaboration, I am extremely hopeful and excited for the future.
Well, that's a great optimistic note to end on, and a positive note. No new questions, Melissa?
We did have one more question from Michael Ball, actually.
Good.
Thank you to Felicia and Glenn for your leadership in our community and within your respective organizations. He says, I'm fortunate to be engaged in initiatives led by you both. What advice or direction can you provide to other listeners who want to get involved?
Felicia, go.
No, I want you to go first. I started.
All right. I would say this, right? First and foremost, start where you're at. There's a tendency to want to jump across the river or jump across the street or go over there and affect change there. Start at your own dinner table, start at your own friend circle, start at your own family circles. And then start with something that excites you and you can bring passion to. Don't just check a box with it, right? And there's already, everyone has a superpower. Wherever you can leverage that superpower and that passion and attach it to something you feel good about attaching it to, you'll change it, right? And it doesn't have to be specifically what Felicia and I align on, right? Or not, right? We all have that thing. But the more you attach your passion, your skills, and your know-how to something, the more it will change. The more you're just going through sort of walking through life and checking the boxes. We all know that, right? This probably was created, and Dennis does a good job because this aligns with his spirit and who he is. Find that alignment internally, put it out and test it on family and friends, build better, more inclusive circles at your dinner table and your friend circles, and then push yourself outward. And I think if you start in the mirror, it just avoids the biggest distraction of all, is looking through the window at your neighbor when all the work is actually in the mirror.
And I want to just say ditto, real quick, ditto to what Glenn said. And I did put the website for the roundtable in there because we have resources that can help you with starting with yourself. Told you part of our work is developing our community's capacity. That's developing our community's capacity. So please visit the website and there's resources.
Well, folks, what you've heard are two, and the question from our third of four speakers at Buffalo Day. Buffalo Day this year will be in week 5, July 23rd. I can't invite you strongly enough to appreciate the fact that everybody in 44 zip codes that define Buffalo, 14201 to 14280, that includes 14208, where the Tops Market is located. And the whole city, in other words, not just a segment, is invited to be free at Chautauqua for the day on Buffalo Day. So you got to figure a way to get there. Register early, your parking's free. But we'll have a panel discussion at the Hall of Philosophy at 3:30 on Tuesday, the 23rd of July. And we've got Glenn, we've got Felicia, and we've got Mike Ball, who was a participant today and who will be speaking on this program in June. This has sort of been a dress rehearsal for that, folks. Get a honed message, no visuals. It doesn't lend itself to visuals, but you can bring, by the way, something to hand out if you want a, one pager with your round table, Felicia, perhaps a bunch of copies like that, and we could give that to the audience, and then they'd have a visual to look at. How's that? So thank you, folks, for joining us. Next week, we get to a topic that is intriguing me for years. How is it that Western New York, and it fits right in with this program, because we know that zip codes defined a great deal. And that's what May 14th was really about. A zip code invited somebody to drive 200 miles who was radicalized and would find the highest percentage of Blacks, go to Tops, figuring they'd be shopping, and shoot them. So zip codes we've known, whether it's education, whether it's wealth, whether it's college education, at every level, income standards, health, income, zip codes matter. And there's a group, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, for years has been measuring every county in the United States. And for some reason, our Western New York counties in New York State always are at the bottom of the heap. And I keep asking the question, and next week's speaker has been asking the same question for the Buffalo News and does the Refresh magazine. And he will be, Scott Scanlon will be our speaker next week, analyzing the most recent numbers issued by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, showing county health outcomes based on, again, zip codes. So join us for that. You'll, I'm sure, find it enlightening. And hold this date, July 23rd. Please mention it to your friends. And you want to take Glenn's advice, start at your own table and mention the Buffalo Day and encourage people to take advantage of what is a pretty expensive ticket on its own merits. It's free if you live in Buffalo in those 44 different zip codes. Take advantage of it, folks. And I hope you can use this The link, you'll be sent the link and for both your organizations, M&T and the Community Foundation and Highmark, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Western New York. One last thing, Chautauqua now has a DEI director, and he's looking through this program to go ahead and learn for Chautauqua County and Chautauqua Institute how to better implement these. So he'll be a speaker with your panel. All right, great day. Thanks, folks, for joining us. I'm Dennis Galucki. Be well and good day.